Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. Gridman Episode 9 is, to this point, the best standalone anime episode for the year of 2018. I was of the opinion that Gridman had some great stuff going on in the early episodes. Even talked about the direction in Episode 4 to that point, before the writing took a little bit of a dive in the middle. But man, has this show made a resurgence in between Episode 8 and 9 to the point where I'm liable to say that Gridman is currently the frontrunner for anime of the season. That's a lot of praise I just heaped on the show, but it's not without cause, because few shows this year have shown as brilliant use of motifs through their whole season as Gridman did in one episode. I don't have a particularly strong thesis statement here, because we're talking about a lot of stuff. From how the use of trains and crossing gates as motifs create narrative through lines for the episode and come to embody one of the major themes of the show, how parallels produce powerful insight into Akane's character, and how episode 9 has small details on small details to make it a near flawless production. Yeah, it's that fucking good. We can tell that red lights and the warning tone that comes with it are important because it's the first shot we see after the banger of an OP plays. The gates haven't fallen yet as the kaiju in the background comes into focus, but as soon as the wings form, the gates close off. It takes only 20 seconds for Gridman to create a thematic link between the wings of the kaiju and the visual and auditory motif of the crossing gates closing. That theme is the inability to move forward, as shown literally by the gates preventing progress, and also in what the dreams exist to do on multiple levels. We'll be coming back to that in a moment. As we cut to the title card, which conveniently enough informs us that the episode is indeed called Dream, we hear the sound of the train passing by, tying the actual object itself into this theme, which makes sense given that trains only give the illusion of movement as the city is locked away from the rest of the world. And those auditory and visual clues will continuously be the bridge between the dreamscape that the characters are trapped in and what we understand to be reality. From Yuta in bed hearing the crossing tone, which brings us back to reality for a split second, before the red lights drop us back into Rika's infirmary visit. It is not a stretch to say that almost every time we cut to a new scene, we're reminded of the theme through the use of these motifs. It's also pretty jarring, a near constant reminder that the dreamscape isn't the real world, and that we shouldn't get emotionally attached to what we see there. One of the only exceptions to this rule is when we freeze frame like a VHS tape right before Yuta takes Akane's hand, where the OST and the voiceover bring us back to reality instead. But that shot of reality has the same flashing red lights, which overlap with Alexis, bringing him into the same inability to move forward fold. This portrays Alexis as the final boss, the personification of what everyone in the show needs to do. We also see Auntie, whose obsession with Gridman has also brought him to a standstill, shown visually when the train drives by. Yuta even almost snaps out of the dream at one point, but the sound of the train passing by and the shadows in the top left bring him back into the dreamscape. And when Yuta eventually does realize it's a dream, it's shown that he jumped the crossing guards as he runs towards Gridman. Yuta, Rika, and Utsumi's run is them progressing forward, leaving behind the dream world to return to their reality. And that's exactly when Gridman rips off the kaiju's wings. Everything that was holding them back is now gone. And this is further exemplified when the Neon Genesis team kills the kaiju, where we then cut to the guards, no longer flashing red, and the noise has stopped. The arms rising up to welcome back more progress. And all of the red lights are gone at this point, both on the crane and over the tracks, telling us that moving forward is possible again, both for Auntie and Akane, though whether they'll take those steps is yet to be seen. This ubiquitous use of trains and its corresponding elements as a motif cement the theme directly in the narrative, and provides an important function as a transition note between the real world and the dream world. But instead of talking around the dream, let's talk about why it's so interesting and how the dream tells us a lot about Akane. I guess the first important thing to note is that while our three protagonists are dreaming, it's all actually Akane's dream. This is implied by the title, using the singular, and the fact that as our three protags run in the ending, they're all able to communicate, suggesting that it's one dream and not three separate ones. And though they all take place at different points in time and have contradictory elements, they seem to all be occurring simultaneously within the dreamscape. Frankly, it doesn't matter if it's 1 dream or 3 so long as we understand that they're all Akane's, which is pretty clear by the end of each segment. The dreamscape is full of parallels to the real world, most clearly in Yuta's portion, which begins with a practically identical opening. Just replace Rika with Akane and you've got the initial 3 shots on lock. They divert from that point, with there being no junk and Akane putting together the amnesia a lot faster. The main element I want to point out here though is the sound design. Do you hear it? In episode 1, there's no background noise during any of these scenes, like at the hospital or in front of the shop, besides the occasional car passing by. Whereas in the dreamscape, there's the ever-present urban chatter of jackhammers and drills, construction noise. Something that is unnecessary in the real world because of the kaiju rebuilding everything at night now becomes an important detail in the dreamscape. In Akane's dream, she doesn't control kaiju, and Alexis is just a guy in cosplay who takes care of her. She doesn't need these powers, she doesn't have these powers, she's just an ordinary girl. This dreamscape is what she desires, and we can learn a lot about her from that. As shown with Yuta, she desires his affection, and to do that becomes as similar to his crush as possible, replacing Rika as the first point of contact and taking her home and her mother as her own. It is possible that this also shows a desire to be like Rika, someone who's normal and has Yuta's eye. Rika's section has some callbacks to episode 4 and 8, which are awesome, but they also portray the exact opposite of what I focused on in my episode 4 analysis. Akane wants to be close with Rika, and the retreading of their first real conversation in the infirmary speaks to this, with Akane moving in right next door and later giving her a big hug in her house. It also screams that the ED is based in some kind of reality, given that the uniforms are the same and given the flowers and colors seem to take place in spring, which would align it with this interaction. As for Utsumi's section, it's a direct callback to episode 6, but instead of Akane focused on determining if Yuta was Gridman, she's engaging with Utsumi as they bond over kaiju, and even go shopping together to buy models. Akane wants friends who are genuinely into the same stuff she is. When she shows off the model in episode 8, her friends don't really get the kaiju but think it's cute, whereas Utsumi's knowledge is on par with her own. The VHS cut is joined by this track, which was also used when Akane revealed she was God in episode 8 to Rika. I'm considering this song the embodiment of Akane's divinity. Since both times it's played, it's to highlight that she created our protagonists. This is important because of what happens when our protagonists leave Akane's dream. But before that, there's some critical dialogue. Right before we jump back into the dreamscape and they leave, we have this nice exchange.
でもいいじゃないか、グリッドマンが消えれば。
Which is a significant change from our first half Akane, who was ecstatic when she thought Gridman was destroyed. But when paired with the next shot, we can interpret so much more. So let's play a little game, shall we? It's called, What Meaning Can We Ascribe to This Shot? We have the train, symbolic of an inability to move forward, Akane running but getting nowhere, flashes of Gridman as Yuta's voice and the warning sounds play in the background. Your choices are A. Despite Akane's best efforts to keep Gridman away, he just keeps appearing, ruining both her reality and her dreamscape. Is it B. Akane wants to progress forward, but her own dreams are holding her back? The Gridman Alliance, represented here by Gridman, is going to save her from them. Is it C. It's a dream within a dream, highlighting Akane's internal struggle between hating Gridman who destroys her creations and her desire to be with Yuta, Rika, and Utsumi? Or D. All of the above? If you selected E, all of the above and a lot more, you're our miracle winner. In all seriousness, this shot has tons of interesting interpretations. And paired with the previous one of her possible tears being lost in the rain, another interpretation, and the following ones of her snapping out of it looking distraught before realizing she's in the dreamscape and being happy, really open up the floodgates. I don't think we'll have a definitive answer until after the show is concluded, but in the meantime, it's time for the dreamscape to disappear. We've jumped in time from the summer to October, and the distance has grown between Yuta and Akane. Not only are they not in the same season mentally, they're also framed really far apart. Yuta cares about the real world and what he has to do. Akane does not, caring more about having fun. When Akane asks if his duty is more important than her, Yuta says that it's important to her. And when Yuta finally remembers his duty, looking at the grave, this song plays. And this is what it sounds like reversed. I can't be sure, but the only song that we've heard up to this point that sounds anything like that is the song that suggests Akane's divinity. Playing it in reverse suggests to me that her godhood is being undone, which we see as the protags leave the dreamscape. Utsumi, meanwhile, gets invited over to Akane's, which is when he realizes that something's weird. Akane places her hands over his while he's holding the kaiju, the direct link to their friendship. After each realization, Akane says don't and why, which can be elongated to don't go and why are you rejecting me? We then have the clearest parallel to episode 4 and 8's bus scenes, with Akane asking Rika if they'll hang out together this summer. The bus scenes have always had opaque windows isolating this transport from the outside. It's the routine that they've shared together a few times now. Rika says that she won't. Akane has plenty of friends to go with, and while acknowledging that they are friends, Rika doesn't finish her sentence. Instead, the windows finally open up, and we can see Gridman in the reflection. The answer is that Rika has other friends who she wants to see too. She can't commit to Akane totally, and they've notably been absent from this dreamscape. Yuta returns the watch, saying that dreams are things you wake up from eventually, Akane replying that she wishes she could stay in a dream forever. Yuta can't join her, which is exactly when we get this amazing shot where there's just blackness between them. That's an unbridgeable gap. Akane will never be partners with Yuta, and then Akane is left alone, surrounded by death that she helped cause. And she's left alone again by Utsumi, who says that they might have been friends if this happened for real before he puts down the kaiju, their bond, and runs off. Akane asks Rika if they can just keep going like this, keep taking the bus and maintaining the status quo. Rika stops the bus and gets off. Everyone has moved away from Akane and back towards each other. Which just leaves us with the very end of the episode where we get another great parallel. Akane in the aftermath of the rain, standing tall. It's an allusion to episode 3 where she thought she had won, but here she couldn't be further from that. Instead of gloating in her apparent victory now, she's sad and defeated, left all alone. And that is quickly followed by her fall to Earth, as she's quickly brought back down to reality, and her march through the alleyway and into the fog. Will Alexis betray her like he treated Auntie at the end of episode 7? Will she come back vicious against those who left her behind? Will she be reflective of what comes next, trying to figure out what should she do? But that's for the next episode to tell us. In the meantime, I've got some stray thoughts. When Yuta is looking around the room in both episodes 1 and 9, the exact same tune is sung, and it appears and sounds to me like Akane is the one singing it in both realities, which raises even more evidence that the real world isn't actually real. If it is Rika singing, then it's just more evidence that Akane wants to be Rika, given that the room still has Rika's things even in the dreamscape. Utsumi, upon waking up grabbing his leg because Bor kicked it while he was asleep, is hilarious. And the reaction when Auntie shows up in this weird shot with the perspective being so wonky really adds to the style of the episode. I'm frankly not sure where Gridman is going to end up. Thematically, this episode felt like a conclusion if the last 5 minutes were changed such that Gridman was at full power and they broke Akane out of the dream, but I'll just take a fantastic standalone where I can, and be thankful that, despite a close call, Gridman has refound its footing and is driving forward with a strong understanding of the story it's trying to tell, and more importantly, how to tell it.